What's up, guys? Welcome to this episode of Becoming the 1% podcast. My guests today are Willy and Joe Johnston. They have had a fundamental impact on the community that we are in here in Gilbert, Arizona. I've been friends with Willy since 7th grade. I've known Joe since about the same time, and it is an exciting episode if you are an entrepreneur. This is a very, very cool discussion on what it takes to actually see a dream manifest, to see an idea come to fruition, and the team members that you should surround yourself with in order to see those goals fulfilled. Enjoy. This episode of Becoming the 1% podcast.
Entrepreneurial. We got some really big things coming.
You have to have the willingness.
It's an A or B.
Try and use it as a tool.
This is phenomenal.
All details make up a person. It's what we believe in the industry.
But guys, thank you for coming on, Joe, Willy. It's so cool, man, because for those not knowing, I mean, I've known you, how long? Was I in 6th grade?
You were probably 6th grade.
6th or 7th
so
grade. When we first...
that was a long time ago. What is that, 20 plus years?
How old are... I know I'm 33. How old are you now?
I'm 34. I'll be 35 this year.
That's what I was saying. We were only a year or two apart. How's it treating you? You liking it?
Being old?
being older, being in mid-30s.
Being older, I love it. I mean, it's crazy to look back and see how fast time flies. I know people always say that, but it's super cool to see how we're still connected to a lot of people we went to school with back in the day. For being such a small school, I know. I still get to see a lot of those people on a regular, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And seeing the small community thrive and grow is really one of the areas, Joe, that I was most excited to talk to you about.
Sure. And I'm double Brandon, by the way.
You what?
I'm double Brandon.
What does that mean?
66.
Good for you, man.
See?
Good for you. That's great.
Who can believe it?
Not me.
So you've lived, when is your birthday?
March 1st. So it's coming up.
So you're about to turn 34?
I'm about to turn 33.
Okay, so this year you have a big
so-
milestone.
What's that?
A third of a century.
Yeah.
And a legit so 4 months after you turn 33 is your third of a century.
Whoa.
I had
That's pretty
this
cool.
August, I'm going to be 2/3 of a century.
That's outstanding.
So you have to kind of make sure you mark that on your
It's a
calendar.
big celebration, man.
Both of
Big.
them are big celebrations.
Big.
I mean, it's so cool to see, and this could not be a better example of kind of where you're at and where you hope to get.
Yeah.
By the time we reach half of a century, I mean, you got to be like, wow, this is really cool. I've accomplished so much, or, maybe we wish we would have accomplished more.
Hopefully by the time that we're a little bit older, we're like, man, we done good.
Yeah.
Done good.
Oh, well, speaking objectively, what you guys have done with the time and resources you've had is truly inspiring. I wanted to start, and Joe, of course, I've known you as long as I've known Willy, since we were both young, sprightly little teenagers.
Yes.
And you were, ever since I've known you, you've been hustling, you've been developing, you've been doing so much stuff that it's so funny, even as a younger person, I mean, when I was a teenager, I remember looking and admiring the creativity that was sort of happening because I lived in Agritopia.
Sure.
I was here when this was nothing but farmland.
Right.
Seeing what has happened in the last 10, 15, 20 years is incredible. Where did that begin for you? I mean, where did you see this community going all the way back when Willy and I were in junior high?
Well, my previous business was Coffee Plantation, which was a chain of coffee houses. And there we were creating community within a building. And so I thought, you know what? After we sold Coffee Plantation, took a little sabbatical, thought about what to do next. One of the things I wanted to do was to have a restaurant on our farm, in our house, that served the produce of the farm. So that was the start of the idea. And then I thought, you know what? I would like to live by where I work so I could walk to work. Then we had a clean sheet of paper, like, okay, like what kind of community do you want to live in? Because it's all like raw dirt.
Yeah.
Lived a lot of different places, went to school, East Coast, West Coast, read a lot about stuff, and then started to just formulate, along with our team, the ideas, the underpinnings, the principles that then flowed out into land plans, architecture, landscape, rules of the game, all the CC&Rs and stuff. So that probably started in, I would say, 1998, 99.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a while back.
Yeah. And did you see it as because it seems like what has been created here is a place where you can be born, live, grow old, and then, I mean, you can live your entire life now in Gilbert, and that's not an accident. I mean, you guys have developed this in a way all the way to the senior living facility. I mean, did you see it like that at the very beginning?
I saw village life, which is common throughout the world. It could be a vertical village in New York. It could be a small village in Iowa. It could be in Japan. But the idea of village life, where instead of being segmented out like is typical in suburbia, where people of all ages and all stages are living together, and different uses like shopping and churches and school, they're all like mashed together. And it's not all parceled out into a very difficult thing to navigate. And so that village life thing was a big deal to me. And so this is just kind of our embodiment of how it's done. There's other ways to do it, but this is how we did it.
And the way in which you did it is to put everybody very close knit. It seems like that's been a common reoccurring theme, even just in the creation of Agrotopia. Totally. That's for those, again, not familiar with Agrotopia. The homes are very, how would you describe them? The way that they're built? Are they Midwestern? How would you describe the architecture?
We examined the architecture of Arizona, older neighborhoods in Arizona, and looked at those architectural styles and then applied them to modern floor plans, modern ways of living. We try to do the best of the old and the best of the new. And so the style is kind of the best of the old. The best of the new is how they're built and how it's all put together. But we did try to make it so that it would be walkable. Because Brandon, as you know, walking is so important. And that's how you're going to meet your neighbors. You're going to meet them serendipitously. You're walking to your mailbox. You're walking over to the farm. You're going to run into people. You start to see a pattern of life. You talk to them. Hey, I'm Brandon. Oh, you're Willie. Good to meet you. Let's talk a little bit. And it naturally causes friendships and bonding to happen.
Yeah. No, when we lived in there, it was like, oh, you're Brandon. I know you guys live in the big 2-story right there. You live in the model home. You live, which is where we live, in the model home. And it does create a sense of intimacy with the people you live next to, which is, I think, by and large good. Some people may argue contrary to that. I guess it depends on who your neighbor ends up being. But it certainly, regardless, creates a sense of community, whether you want it to or not, where you are going to interact with the people you live with if the lots are parceled quite close and they are full-on homes. What's the biggest square footage of a home in Agrotopia?
Well, the largest is 5,200 square feet, and it's designed so it can be next to a 1,600 square foot. Because remember, the house you had basement, main floor, and then loft, and that's how we got like a large house next to a smaller house without it looking like out of place. Because we wanted people with large families or small families, blue collar or white collar, to be able to live on the same street, to kind of mix it up instead of like, as you know, in most suburbs, it's marketed to a starter home product or a custom home product. And people are kind of parceled out by market instead of like, we're trying to create community instead of trying to sell a product, which is a house. And so having that ability to have a big house by a small house. And, I think you guys had an auxiliary dwelling unit maybe on yours too. Did you have like a little guest room?
Yes.
All that to allow flexibility.
Yeah, ours was one of the biggest lots, I think, at some point in the entire community, because it was the 3-story. It had the back area, and if you remember,
you guys took the fence now, right? Got the house behind it.
The house behind it.
You know what? That was smart. That was super smart. Doug is a smart man,
which is not uncommon because actually that's something that more people have done now, where you'll see people buying a house and the house next to it and taking the fence down. And
that's my plan here.
Yeah, honestly, it's a very smart thing.
Yeah. And you can utilize it in so many different ways, especially I think today we've seen a large emergence of home businesses. People doing, especially since, and I wanted to ask your opinion on this as well.
Sure.
Especially since, COVID, since that all went down, it seems like a lot of people have looked inward and have decided, hey, I didn't really think about this at first, but this is a safer play. I'll start my company in my second dwelling, or I'll start it in my garage. Have you guys seen, and obviously you've got your finger on the button of all small business ventures in all of Gilbert. I mean, have you seen that? In your experience, has that come up more?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of people now. I would say a good chunk work from home. And those small businesses, we've got everything from, in the past, architecture studio, photography studio. I mean, there's been hairstylists, real estate firms, all housed out of their homes in Agrotopia and do business out of that. And our CC&Rs, but also what our zoning allows, is very unique for Gilbert in that we allow those home-based businesses to thrive, and we actually encourage it.
Yes, I wanted to talk about that as well, because that is before we did this, I did a lot of research onto, first of all, can this be done? I mean, is it possible to take this as far as I wanted to take it without interfering with some sort of bylaw or something? And Gilbert is very unique in that it does what you just said. It encourages innovation, entrepreneur mindset, and the home-based business. Is that something that you guys helped implement, or did it already sort of just exist when you guys started developing? Do you think that's a good thing? I mean, to allow that.
Well, we do think it's a very, very good thing. And I would say we helped to implement it, but it was a part of, and Willie was there,
Yeah.
and Jamesy was there. We went to Costa Rica after we sold Coffee Plantation as a part of the sabbatical to work on our Spanish. And we lived in a house with another family, and everybody's house on that street had a side gig. Ours, they sold cheese from their parents' village. The other guy, he had a library. The guy over there had a convenience store. The guy across the street repaired semi-trucks in his front yard. And it enlivened the street so much. We said, you know what? We got to work on this because zoning doesn't allow this, typically speaking. It's typically residential or business, but not both. And so when we came back, thought, you know what? We don't want semi-repairs going on in front yards.
Yeah.
But these other things are great. And we designed it so that you can have non-family member employees, which is even, I'm not sure in Gilbert if you can do that in other places, but like you can have a draftsman, or you can have another engineer, you can have a sound tech, all those sorts of things within there. And you can also have signage, and you can also have some amount of business.
Really?
Oh yeah.
So you can have signage.
Right.
Where?
It's
On
in there on the front, on the back pathway.
Whoa.
So do you remember?
Yes.
You remember the Lamars back in the day?
Yes.
So they had a sign on the front of their house that said Lamar Photography.
I had no idea you
Yes.
could have signage.
There's real estate firm right on the front.
Right on the front.
Says real estate. Yeah.
It's so incredible, and in my experience, it really does, to what you just said, Joe. It really enhances a community.
Oh,
It-
yeah.
it becomes where, and if you're lucky enough to pull it off, to where your Lamar Photography is actually thriving and the community is building and people are seeing it.
yeah.
They're like, oh, you live here and you do this. I've seen you on social media. I've seen you doing that. And I mean, it's, for us, it's gotten to the point where strangers will knock on our door and be like, is this Strict Vision Athletics? We're like, yeah. DM us and we'll set you an appointment, man. Absolutely. But it's very cool to actually be able to take what it is you love and what it is you do and have the freedom to do it from a home-based business.
Well, Brandon, you've taken it to the ultimate level. It's unbelievable. No, seriously, it's unbelievable. And yet, I'm sure because you live here, it still meets all of the CC&R requirements. I mean, that's pretty darn cool the way you've done this.
It took a lot of digging and a lot of strategy, because the way I understand the CC&Rs and the actual rules pertaining to this, you can do this. You cannot interfere with the noise or aesthetic of the neighborhood.
Yeah,
right.
So you have to go above and beyond to make sure you're not showcasing. That's why the signage thing is, and that may be, Morrison Ranch may have some specific no when it comes to a sign.
I could see that.
Because I honestly, I knew, it's why I did my truck. I wrapped my truck on purpose and parked it right there because I knew I can't do signage.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to know where I'm at, well, they can look at the truck and they're going to probably be able to guess.
It's easy to find your house with the truck.
Oh, dude. Oh my goodness. And in traffic, at stoplight, people
At the coffee shop.
At the coffee shop.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I try my best to parallel park so people can see it as they walk by.
I love it.
But no, it has been just incredible to see the community grow and thrive around what you guys have started. And it goes so much beyond just the way you structured the homes, the way that the actual living environments are for all ages. You've implemented fine dining as well. And now with the epicenter I want to talk about next, but the restaurants, where did that fall into this? Because it seems like you've done all these different ventures simultaneously, and I'm curious how.
It all looks like it happened all overnight, but Brandon, it just takes a long time to build the infrastructure, the businesses, and also the personal network. I mean, I've been in the restaurant business with Coffee Plantation, then we've done barbecue, Farm Grill, Liberty Market, and so on, and then got involved with the Restaurant Association, and then built a network of fellow restaurateurs that we know. And so when it came to the time to start looking for people, well, we went and talked to the people that we knew, and Willie was fully involved in that as well. The head of the Restaurant Association connected us with a couple of the primary tenants. I mean, as you know, you're in the fitness business, and so you understand, as you network and know more people, it just starts to build to a critical mass.
150%.
Yeah.
The exposure you provide for yourself will come back to you.
Yeah.
And that's something I strongly encourage any young entrepreneur, especially if you're starting something in the first, call it 1 to 3 years, focus on networking. Networking is usually free. networking is usually just just an exchange of time for attention. That's really all it is. If you are willing to put yourself out there, it can be in personalized groupings. Like if you're, like you said, you're going to the restaurant association, you're meeting all these groups of people that are helping you develop, or through social media. I mean, you guys have 11,000 followers on the Epicenter, which is, how long has the Epicenter even been in existence? Is it a year?
We had a ribbon cutting in November of last year, but
it's not been a year.
We've been working on it for 10 years.
Oh, right, of course.
But like officially open for less than a year.
Less than a year,
yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said, which is, oh yeah, we've been working on it for 10 years, but everybody like who's on the outside is like, oh,
it's just
been open for 6 months. Yeah,
it just
appeared.
We get the same thing, and people are like, I can't believe this has been here. I do. I'm like, yeah, man, we've been here for about 10 years, and there's a lot of lessons in that as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And both of you, this is a question for both of you guys. What would be your advice to somebody who is starting a new venture, somebody who's brand new to business, maybe even someone who's going into business for themselves? It seems like a common theme we find is that people sometimes have an unrealistic expectation on the timeline with which success operates. Again, they see, they hear the name Johnston, they see all the stuff you guys, and they're like, oh, well, I mean, how long could that have really taken? Or how long until I am there? And how much work? What would be your advice to the young startup entrepreneur who's going into business for themselves?
You want to start, Will?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of patience and a lot of perseverance. It is one of the hardest things to be successful. You see on social media, people seem like overnight successes. Hey, I went from making very little to making, 6 figures overnight. And for us, what it really comes down to is how much do you care about what you're doing? Because, I mean, it's evident in what you do. Like, you care deeply about not just the fitness that you do here, but also creating a community for people that is so unique and has every aspect of wellness for the body. And you pour your life into it. I mean, this is your home, but also this is your business. For us, same thing. The fact that we live where we develop, and we pour all of our energy and effort into making what we call home better, I think takes a lot of work. It takes you being, really tied to it 24/7 and committing your life to it. One of the things that we always talk about is stewardship, and stewardship is such an important piece to that puzzle. If you want to be a successful business owner, you have to view it as a stewardship opportunity, something where you take your skills, your assets, whatever it is, your vision, and turn it into something that is reality. And you have to sometimes take a step back and say, man, this vision's hard. This is real hard, and persevere through it. So for us, people are like, how do you do this? Well, you have to be willing to commit years and years and know that sometimes the end result might not even be what you want, but you have to take that risk. Risk is a big thing we always talk about. Is we try to take calculated risks, but you always have to be willing to risk something.
Right. Absolutely. Stewardship is such a beautiful word to answer that with. I love it because it's biblical. It's a mandate. And I think it's something that's been really kind of inherently gifted to mankind. And I think I think even more so, to take it a step further, I think it's an obligation for us. Yeah. If you are somebody who has passion and drive and vision, I believe it is inherently compelled upon you to act on it. Oh, yeah. I think it is a sin if you keep it inside, if you don't share it with the world, and if you don't develop it as best you can. Joe, same question for you. What would you see as your biggest piece of advice to somebody who is just starting out on their business journey?
I'm going to adopt what Willie said, and I'm not going to reiterate it, but I'm going to mention 2 other things that are important. One of them would be the idea that no one is a island unto themselves. No one has the full giftedness necessary to do virtually anything, because I started out thinking like I was like a great entrepreneur and that we had to do it all ourselves. My partner Tim was with it. We just did it together. And then after I had the sabbatical, started working on like, what is my giftedness and how should I use it? And mine is vision, which is a fancy word for like, I have ideas and I put together the necessary assets to make it happen. That's all it is.
I get it. Yeah.
Not better than dishwasher, not better than dishwasher, but I realized, look, independence is not the goal. Interdependence, having a team that you are interdependent on. That allows you to go on vacation because you know that they're on the same page. They are helping build the dream. They're operators, or they're financial gurus and stuff that are like keeping it going. And the interdependence, and as you know, from a Christian perspective, the idea of the body of Christ and the various gifts that people have is a big deal. So that interdependence thing versus like independence, that's like the real free thing is interdependence, not independence is like,
Yeah.
But then also know when to quit, because there's perseverance, but some of my best decisions have been knowing when to quit. Sometimes quitting is like the best thing. And I'm not a quitter, but some of my quitting has been like the best thing ever.
Knowing when a venture has run its course, when it's not panning out. That's a hard one.
Yeah, or knowing
Or
that,
choice in
or
life.
let's say you thought that you wanted to go into real estate, and you start going down that ladder,
Yeah.
and you realize, you know what, I'm doing pretty well at this, actually doing great at this, but I hate it. So, or I'm not really gifted in it.
Yes.
I mean, I left the Naval Academy. I got on board a submarine, like 2 years into my schooling, and I wanted to be in submarines. I went on it for a week. I came out. I wanted to leave the Naval Academy because submarines were out for me. And if I hadn't quit the Naval Academy, the rest of my life would have been 180 degrees different.
It could not be a better example of... You mentioned real estate and going down, because literally what you're saying is what I did when I got out of college. I got hooked up. I got my license. Remember that?
Yeah.
I was, he shall not be named. I got hooked up with him and then was flipping homes, and I made more money than I'd ever made in my young adult life, but I hated it. I felt like I was taking advantage of people. I felt like it was dishonest. I didn't like I didn't like it. It made me feel bad at the end of the day. Knowing that had failed, and unfortunately not realizing that for 3 years, working at something for 3 years, especially something that, and it's interesting when you work at something, like you said, even something that is successful from a money standpoint,
That's harder still.
that's even harder to leave, because now I'm relying on this source of income. This is the time I feel like I'm going backwards. I feel like I've gone to this point. Now I'm not just going to regress. I'm going to regress further than I did when I was at the starting line of this new venture. Now I literally don't know what I'm going to do. That is one of the single worst feelings that I've ever had in my professional life, is knowing that the time I spent was wasted. So in your head you think, but
Yeah, but it's not.
it's not.
Yeah.
You learn a lot from that, for sure.
You learn a lot. You learn everything from the time that was not in your head wasted.
Yeah.
It's not. You are learning lessons from your failures, and you're learning lessons even if they're not quote unquote failures. If you're making money but you hate it, that should teach you a lesson about money. And that should teach you a lesson about happiness. Hey man, I'm making money at something I don't like.
And I'm miserable.
I'm miserable. Wow. All those social media guys, maybe they have it wrong. Maybe money isn't everything. Maybe this is a lie. And that is, I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned from my time in real estate before I truly dug in and followed something that had absolutely no infrastructure at all. I learned that money is not the valuation that it's been presented to me, especially when you've spent your time around somebody who, if any of us have ever been in business with somebody who's obsessed with money, you know what I'm talking about. Somebody whose gears grind around money, 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 that tune gets old really fast. And you learn that, man, that is not the definition of true success.
No.
Other than money, what would be maybe one or even two areas of life that you two would define as true success?
This is a good one. So we actually look at ROI, return on investment, differently than most people. And ours is, what benefit does it bring to the community, and what joy does it bring to our family? So we've done a lot of things. I mean, in business, you have to make money to continue on. I mean, that is inevitable. But for us, we've done a lot of things where the returns are maybe in financial terms not quite as stellar as one would maybe want, but what it does for the community or for our family life is better than you can imagine. And so for us, I think the ROI that we look at always is a little bit different, because it allows us to find a lot more joy and happiness in the process than one would think. That would be we look at how does it benefit our family and also our friends and our neighborhood and Gilbert as a whole. You know, there's plenty of ways to make money fast, but what's the long-term impact? Are we creating institutions. And that's one thing that we talk about with the restaurants are, the barbecue is now an institution. It's a place that people know. It's been there for a long time. It does very well financially, but also it's a place that because of how it was thought through and designed and developed, it's a place where people go and they have...
It's a hallmark.
It's a hallmark.
Yes.
They create memories there. And for us, if you can have both, that's great. But
yeah, Joe, same question.
Well, Brandon, God did not create kettlebells. He didn't create burritos. And you say, Joe, why are you saying this? The fact is God has been so gracious to us to give us gifts to do things, to design kettlebells or make burritos and design them ourselves. I feel as though the most fruitful and most exciting thing is to be able to use the gift that God gives you. And they don't call it a gift for no reason, because a lot of people think, well, I'm nervous about what God's gift to me is because I could hate my gift. Like, God does not give people gifts that they hate. I love my gift, and Willie loves the gift that he's been given, and you love the gift that you've been given. And so to be able to use that gift with gusto to the benefit of the community and to the kingdom is like incredible success. And beyond that, I even hate to say it, pleasure. It's like, it's great. It's fun.
It feels good.
It feels good. It feels rewarding.
100.
Yeah.
It brings fulfillment
Yes.
to an otherwise somebody who is not using the gifts that God gave. And I love the way you presented it. I think it's very beautifully stated. Everyone's different. Everybody's gifts will manifest in different ways.
Sure.
But regardless of how that looks, not using it or muting it or using it in a way that you think is not bettering your community.
No.
It just breeds some of the most miserable people, and the toughest conversations that we have are with people who will openly say,
I'm miserable.
I'm miserable.
Yeah.
Or I was miserable. I was miserable for the last 5 years of my life. I'm now on a new journey. Here's what I'm doing. I'm making significantly less money, but I feel like I'm using what I am good at in a way that actually helps people. And I think it says a lot about human nature and how we're meant to interact with one another.
Sure.
You stated a little bit earlier in one of the topics where you feel that it's so imperative as a businessman in any venture to know what it is your gifts are and to know how to bring other people around you that mirror your gifts. And there's a very, very great scene. Either of you ever see Jobs with Michael Fassbender where he plays Steve Jobs?
Yep.
Not the biggest fan of him personally, but it was a very good scene where Woz asks him very frankly, what is it you do? You don't know how to code. You don't know you didn't design the Apple computer. I did that. What is it you do? And he says, I'm the conductor. I play the orchestra. And you are the absolute best at that position right there.
Yeah.
While he was presenting it in a way that might be slightly condescending, I do like the way that argument is presented, which is that someone can be a absolutely horrendous musician, but a very good conductor. And understanding that your role has to thrive with brilliant musicians all around you, or otherwise you're just a crazy person standing up there waving your arms.
Yeah.
That is a huge, huge part of being successful.
Yes.
How has bringing team members around, and specifically family members that are team members around you, impacted your business decisions?
Well, first of all, the closest person is my wife, and we have polar opposite giftedness, which is great. Because when we were first married, I found it a little annoying because I'm the optimist and she's more, I'll say, the realist. And so, and I'm like, big picture. She's like, well, what about this nitty gritty? It's like, but but eventually once we saw each person's giftedness and how we interlock, it's been awesome. And she's the one that actually should be credited with a lot of the success in that she said, this is going to be a 10-minute rule. You cannot do anything, have any business that's further than 10 minutes from the house. And that made us plant our roots deep, like right here in Gilbert, and focus all of our attention here instead of like scatter it around the valley and then not have as much impact. So that has been helpful. And then like Willie and I work closely together and his giftedness is incredible. It's like he has a little bit of Joe and a little bit of Cindy, but he has a lot of himself. And it's just like his giftedness is, way different than mine and super critical to particularly the phases we've been in now that it would not have gone well with me.
Yeah, Willie, same question.
Yeah.
How has that worked for you working with family members and seeing the different strengths and weaknesses that you two balance with each other?
Totally. No, I love working with my dad. I mean, he is the best mentor I could ask for. Fantastic father, wonderful friend. What's really cool for me is the fact that he always called himself he's the head cheerleader. And so he's
Love it.
He's the guy who's, saying, hey, this is great. Love this. And he's able to have some of those harder conversations sometimes with partners and things too. But he's the guy who's like really behind the scenes saying, guys, this is awesome. And supporting us on social media, but also just in our daily lives, texting team members and saying, hey, congrats, guys. I would consider myself the coach of the team. But I've got some stellar athletes on the team.
Oh, you do.
Like I look at Phil Knight. I mean, not Phil Knight. Phil Jackson, sorry.
Important distinction.
Phil Knight was Nike, or Bill Belichick, right? You're a great coach, but when you have athletes that are the best,
Yeah.
it just highlights it makes you look like a better coach.
Right.
And so for me, the team that I have, I've had a lot of people work with me. I call them all colleagues. I'm not better than anybody. I'm super, super fortunate to just have worked with and continue to work with just amazing people. And my dad has taught me some critical skills on selecting people to work with. How do you build that team? Because sometimes, if you have the wrong team member on board, it can really make the whole team suffer. And so I've just learned a ton from my dad. My mom is, she's the brains behind a lot of things, and she does get the credit. She does not. And my wife, obviously, she's amazing. She supports me a ton. And same thing. She's more like my dad in that she's big picture optimist, is always criticizing me in the way that like, I don't celebrate in little victories.
Yeah.
I'm hey, when the job is done, I'm going to celebrate. Type
Right.
thing.
Not when the steps
Yeah,
1 through
yeah.
3 are complete. I want to see the whole thing done. Then I'll take.
When I finish the
victory lap.
marathon and there's a medal around my neck,
Then I celebrate.
right?
Yeah.
And so she's really good at saying, hey, pause, see where you've gotten already. Don't look what's ahead. Just look back and say, hey, this mountain, we've climbed half of it. Celebrate that. So I love working with my family, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's
I really
beautiful.
wouldn't.
It's also well said and well stated. I love the difference of the dynamics that you guys have and how you've brought them together with such synergy. And because Joe, I'm more like you. I'm the cheerleader.
Wow.
I'm the guy who I see the whole thing in my head. It's like already done. I can see. I'm okay, now I just got to get everybody else to see it the same way, and then we'll all win.
Yeah.
And I think it is. There's a brilliant Jordan Peterson moment I watched where he was talking about the difference between the conservative and liberal mind, not to be confused with leftist, rightist, politically speaking, but the liberal and conservative minds need each other in such an important way. For guys like us who are the, artistic, really big visionary guy, we can see it and we know how to make it kind of exist, but we don't know about all the problems we're going to run into in order to get there. In order to get there, you need more conservative-minded individuals, people who, hey, listen, at some point we got to pay taxes. Like we have to do these things to get to where I can appreciate what you see. And that's the key as well. I think when it comes to guys like us relating to people who are more like your wife, more like Willie, more like Eli. Eli and I are a perfect example. We are, I would say we're pretty darn close to the polar opposite when it comes to
Sounds about right.
strengths and weaknesses and how we work together. But we have found a way to where I listen to him when it comes to some of the day-to-day constraints as far as the project has to get done. We can't start the next one until this one concludes. And I have brought him along with, hey, here's how I see this growing. Here's how I see it going. And let's just make it all happen in 1 week. And I think if you can bring your team together and meet in the middle, that's one of the quickest ways that you will find
Absolutely.
success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, for us, one of the really fun things is there's oftentimes, this period of us kind of pushing back on one another too, where, he'll have an idea and I'll say, I don't know about this. This doesn't, and so there we go back and forth. We go through a risk analysis or, sometimes I'll be kind of more of the push on something, and it's like, man, Willie, you really think that's the wise decision? So we have that, and we always come to terms on kind of where we get to, and especially with epicenters, we talked about that a little bit, just getting into how do we select tenants and who's the right ones and how do we go through this process. we spent a lot of time conversing on how do we handle this together.
Yeah.
And we both have skill sets where we just complement each other, and that's so helpful to have that.
Staying on the topic for a little bit longer of family together in business, because what we just talked about is sort of the, hey, if you find each other in the middle, it works, it does great. What do you do when it doesn't? Because there's a lot of people who maybe they've tried to work with family members, and a lot of times you've heard it said, I'm sure, don't work with family. Yep. Usually the people who didn't work well with family members and ended up damaging they damaged both professional and now personal relationships simultaneously, because if you work with your brother, your father, your son, and you have a bad fallout over money or something that goes wrong, well, now it's kind of hard to sit down at Thanksgiving and not have friction.
Yeah.
How do you two see overcoming adversity in professional life? How do you avoid it interacting with personal life?
I'll say mine first.
Yeah, go for it.
So always put family first. I think that's the biggest one, because oftentimes where those arguments come into play is when you're putting money first or fame or success first. And so, one thing that my dad and I try to do is prioritize time to talk about family and talk about faith and friendship and all those things as well. So having time to really focus on us having a great father and son relationship. And James included that too. My brother James, we do boys' night out, where, oftentimes Liam, my son, comes with us too, where we just go out and it's us guys hanging out. We do Sunday lunches at my parents' house or out pretty often too, where we just have that family time where, yes, business comes up, but for us, making sure that we enjoy time with each other first and foremost is super, super key. I think it's hard when maybe family doesn't understand what you're doing as an individual within a family business, right? That can sometimes be challenging. Well, are you pulling your weight? Are you doing what you said you would do? Those kind of things. And it's really, I think, just having that proper communication channel and just getting ahead of it before it comes to a head. So if there's a question of, well, what are you doing? Being able to say, hey, let's talk through that. Let me tell you what I'm doing and why I'm doing these things. And so communication and putting family first are my two things that I would say that's how you be successful in it. If it's not successful, making sure that you kind of quit it before it becomes a long-term challenge for the family, I think is the most important thing. Because if it's not working, it's not worth, risking a father-son relationship, a brother relationship, whatever it could be.
No, that's huge. I think regardless of whether or not it's a family member, that part, having clear communication with business partners, with people that you're working with is probably the way to avoid the erosion of a lot of the situations that become explosive, because that's usually what happens. Someone didn't communicate what they were doing, like you said. And that's specifically the example you gave is one that, I've had trouble with. And I think anytime you're doing something that is, neither one of you guys have bosses. You guys are your own employers. And you have, again, big picture, medium picture, and you're working on things toward both. Oftentimes, and we've experienced this, there's not really a lot of, crossroads on what he's doing and what I'm doing. We kind of just have to meet and talk about it together. And hopefully communication is good enough to where, if something isn't happening, you can talk about it. And I've had to work on this a lot myself, because for me, approaching areas where maybe something isn't happening to the speed that I anticipated them happening, I've had to really kind of disconnect emotion from business. And I'm a very emotional person. I can see that, Joe. You probably like me in that area too, because it's your passion. Having to disconnect that and approach it from a much more statistical, analytical business mind is huge. Same question, Joe, to you.
Sure.
So when it comes to friction in family, in business together, how do you avoid those situations and make sure they don't damage the family life?
Well, first of all, Cindy and I both come from self-employed family backgrounds. So for us, like the blending of business and family, it's like a seamless thing where it's not like, well, this is business and this is family. And she grew up in dry cleaning. I grew up on the farm. I worked with my dad. I worked with my grandpa. I worked with my cousins. It was just like, it was like a natural thing to do. So I have worked for other companies briefly a couple of times, and it's just like different. It's weird that way. I don't know, but we feel just like it's just how we do things. We're just comfortable with it. And there's a little bickering, a little this and that. There's no offense in it.
Yeah.
I think also we try to avoid being unequally yoked because the Bible talks about being unequally yoked, and usually it's just applied to marriage and dating,
Faith.
stuff like
Yeah.
that, but it is also unequally yoked in business. You want to make sure, like you were talking about, money-minded people. There are believers, there are Christians who are money-minded, and you're probably better off sort of as far as getting along with having a non-money-minded non-Christian. I don't recommend that, but the idea of, like, you got to be on the same page about how you treat people, how you think about money. And thankfully within our family, we're not unequally yoked. Willie and Jamesy, Cindy and I, and even in my business partnerships with dear friends, we're on the same page as to all the important things in life. And so if there's something comes up, we're going to do it kind of unanimously. We're going to talk it through, and that's how we're going to make it happen. There's not going to be, I don't think I ever really told you this is just how it's going to be. You disagree, we're just going to do it. Have I ever done that? I don't know.
No.
If I have, tell me, Joe, you have.
No, I don't.
Okay, but and Willie has not done the same thing. Like, hey, Joe, you're completely wrong, and
there's times where
we've talked it through.
There's times where we'll challenge each other though and say, "Hey, I really think this is the way it should go," and you give, "Hey, I'm going to trust you on this." It's more of that trust factor in those things. But I think that we talked things through enough prior to us going, "Hey, we're moving forward with this path where we are both comfortable." I think that, and we always include, that discussion with. My mom's always involved, my brother's involved, our wives are involved. I mean, it's one of those things that we have to make decisions in a way that everybody feels comfortable. And there's times where one might not feel comfortable, so it takes some more time to have and kind of get them to a comfort level that makes them happy. I mean, a good example is when we did one of the deals at Epicenter, it came to us and it's like, this is a great opportunity, but it was something that, could be in competition with one of James's businesses. And so before we even responded to them, I called James up and said, "Hey, James, here's what we're talking about. I won't do it if it would make you feel like that's competition or upset about it." And so, he thought about it, talked to, his wife, and came back and said, "No, Willie, go after it. Let's go." But having the ability also in a moment of excitement to say, "Hey, pause, let me check with family first." I think
very
it's
wise.
a really important thing, because if I had responded first and had not gotten James's buy-in, then it could have caused, a long-standing issue. And so it's kind of in those moments stopping and saying, "Hey, how do we think of family when things are going great or poorly?"
Yeah. And if you had acted on it and then gone to James after the fact and said, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. What do you think?" It would have been a lot would have been and that would have created, in my experience, that would have created a problem just the way that it went down. He probably would have came to the same conclusion, which is that it doesn't interfere with his business, but he would have always remembered that you acted first and then went to him for
totally.
And so that goes a long way too. You always want to make sure that when you're dealing with family, and I mean, if you make a mistake, that's the other thing. And I can speak to that too. I mean, made mistakes, had moments of times when I wasn't transparent and had to come to the family members and play and say, "Hey, I made a terrible mistake. Here's what happened. Please forgive me and tell me how we can make it right." That's also an important lesson to learn. I don't think anyone gets through their entire business life without making dishonest mistakes in some way. I think, and I think it's also, especially today, you listen to any business-minded guru or anything, they're not really talking too much about that. It seems like they just want you to think they never screwed anybody. They never made a dishonest mistake. And usually that's not true. Usually all of us have had that happen. And finding ways to, hey, be contrite, humble yourself, apologize, and move on. And hopefully that's what happens.
Yeah.
There's lessons in that too.
No, I think, being able to humble yourself and apologize in any situation that, you've made a mistake in, is key. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that you see. If somebody is so narcissistic that they can't see the wrong that they've done in any situation, with a spouse, with a friend, with family, with business, with anything, I think that's a really important thing to do, is just to humble yourself and take a step back. And one of the hardest things for me sometimes is to look through somebody else's eyes, right? How do I take a step back and say, well, let me look through their eyes and see why they might feel this way about this thing. And so my wife is really good at saying, "Hey," when there's an issue with work, she's like, "Hey, well, have you thought from their perspective?" I'm like, "Well, No, because I'm right, you know? And then, and then,
Yes.
and so it's nice to kind of be like, all right. And she goes, well, if I was them, this is probably what I'm feeling. And so having a partner also in life that can kind of help walk you through those things,
Yeah.
so that it kind of helps humble you and allows you to see those things, I think is really important.
Oh, I totally agree. I think that's also an inherently strong trait that a lot of females have, that women possess, sometimes even ahead of men, is the ability to empathize and really get into the mind of a different person. Like, what are they going to feel long before what am I going to feel?
Oh,
and
yeah.
and there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that in any scenario, not just business.
Agreed.
So for you guys, I mean, last kind of overarching question. What do you guys see as next? I mean, the epicenter is thriving. Things are going. Is there any? Can you give us a hint? Is there anything you can drop on here? What are you guys working on? What's next?
We hate that question, but that's okay.
What's next actually is, you know, my dad's going to become a fitness guru with you here.
Yes.
Get super swole.
Let's go.
No, what's next is something that I think is also a really good principle that oftentimes people don't do, and that is let the dust settle.
Ooh.
So for us, we've been going and going and going for a long time with not just Epicenter, Bar None, before that, Liberty Market, you know, Farm Grill, barbecue, Agritopia as a whole.
Agritopia.
It's been going for a long time. And so there's a lot of opportunities that we have in front of us.
Yeah.
I think for us, kind of letting the dust settle, you know, a farming thing is letting the fields lay fallow. Just kind of seeing what opportunities are available, but for us too, it's just finding some health in that quiet. It's our version of a float spa, kind of.
I love it. I love it.
No, but there's a lot of things that I think we both have ideas on. But right now it's just a time for us to take, you know, some time to just enjoy what we've created and see the beauty in it.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes, I'm sure that you see often a lot of the problems and not always the beauty and the joy in what you do. And so for us, I see all the problems and rarely do I enjoy the end results. So that's kind of our thing. We're working with some different groups on some ideas that they have right now, but nothing major at the moment.
I am very similar to you in that area, where for me, I am almost unfulfilled if I am not chasing a challenge. If there's not currently a problem I'm solving or a project that I'm working on, I almost feel like something is missing. And I love, you know, like it's like Tony Soprano, you got to stop and smell the roses. That is something that I have really had to kind of internally work on for me, because what is the good of overcoming these dozens and dozens and hundreds of challenges if when you get them done, you can't at least pause and breathe? Joe?
Well, I would concur with Willie. The idea of a working sabbatical, you know, that's when a lot of the creative things happened about Agritopia was on a sabbatical. You know, the underpinnings, the Costa Rica thing, all those things, the studying of what's next, that quiet time, like what is your giftedness and how are you going to work going forward? So this kind of working sabbatical idea is super important. We get to enjoy stuff and work on some things that internally that are currently, there's noise, there's things going on, you know, there's all the noise of like, well, the landscaping needs to be worked on and all this noise. And then if we can just like quiet our minds, like, you know, in your float tank, quiet your mind. But we don't do that over an extended period to really enjoy and have clarity.
Yeah.
I think one thing I just want to add, what's so interesting about what you guys are talking about, letting the dust settle and taking that breath. I think so often this isn't really talked about, but when you see that goal and it's finished and it's a success or failure, I think a lot of people actually have some type of depression after because they've worked so hard and for so many years and now it's done and it's a success. The Epicenter is incredible. I'm there every day. How have you guys been able to take that step back, take that breath, and just recognize like all that hard work is now paid off, but like not knowing what the next thing is? Like how are you guys able to do that?
Good question.
That's a good question there, Eli. I think for me, knowing that there's plenty of things with one of my giftednesses is organization. There's plenty of things as we work to quiet that need to be organized. Not that it's going to take the same effort as it took to do Epicenter, but there's things that in order for us to be stewards long term,
Mm-hmm.
there are things for me to do. The other thing too for me is, I've got a wife and 3 kiddos, and
Yeah.
my dad was fortunate enough and worked really hard so that he was at every of my games. Right, he was able to be involved with school and those things, and so for me, because of a lot of the time and effort I put in, and we had kids earlier in life, I was a little less available in the younger years, as my dad was too, to some degree, which when he was working hard.
Ours too.
Which it's like, well, now I can be more involved with them and find, just more joy of seeing my kids grow up and being a part of their lives at a time where I can teach them what I've learned through business about perseverance and and just being a patient person. And so for me, I'm looking forward to actually that quiet, because it allows me to pour into the most important people in my life, which is, my direct family. So that's where I take it. I'll be working during the sabbatical, but really it's more of how do we create that path for future stewardship and success.
Yeah.
But just in a not massive project way for the time being. It's going to be a little quieter.
Yeah. Joe, it opens up an interesting question I had for you, which you just kind of brought up to me. Your process of, because I'd be very interested in hearing it because I have my own, your process of creativity. Where do you find is the best way for you to kind of manifest ideas in your head, in your mind? What do you do? What's your process like?
Well, I mean, I've got my book always, my little sketchbook here, and I write stuff down.
Yeah.
Write down stuff, draw little sketches. And for me personally, I have found that everybody has good ideas. So what I do is I start out with the kernel of the idea, hey, I want to have this, this restaurant on the farm that serves produce, blah, blah, blah. And I want to create a community. And I start saying it to people. And then Brandon, you say, well, have you thought of this place, in Georgia that has done it? And no, I'm going to research that. And then Willie says, well, I think the really important thing is to have the tree lined streets. That's super important to community. And they start adding people's ideas to the yarn ball until I build a huge yarn ball of everybody's ideas. And it sounds like it's my idea, but it's actually the collective ideas of a bunch of people. As I preach it, as I do the cheerleading, we want to do this thing. Yeah, have you thought of this? And then we just keep adding it on there. So that's my process. And I draw pictures of it. And then I have to do a mini business plan that I can show people. It's just all written out. And then they 2 pages, and then they read it and they say, have you thought of this and that? Then I do a bigger business plan and then a bigger one until finally it's kind of the full orb is written out and drawn in little sketches and stuff and ready to roll.
I think too, for my dad, is he finds a lot of joy in travel.
Oh yeah.
And different cultures and different foods and just different people and meeting different people, whether it's on a cruise or it's wherever. And so one thing that I know he finds a lot of joy in is just seeing what else is out there. I mean, I think for anybody who's creative, seeing what they haven't seen before, lends a lot to that. I mean, the Costa Rica thing really was primarily at least for us, was to kind of be engulfed in Spanish and to be living in a community that only speaks Spanish. And for us to, as kids, learn more, and for my mom and dad, and it was cool because some of the byproducts of that were what we now have today with Agritopia. And so my parents, whenever they get to travel, it's always cool because my dad is a piler, not a filer. So he'll have piles of magazine articles and brochures and different things, or web pages that he's printed out for every possible place on the trip. And he'll put together a full itinerary of, here's 8 things we can do in this one day. We can pick 1 or 2 of them or nothing, but he always has ideas of what he wants to see and look at. And I think for what I've seen with him, because we've traveled extensively together, is he's never unprepared, but he's also in for the process and the adventure. And so if one day just things aren't working out, there's always a way to pivot, but still enjoy it and see some new things. And so, he's the best. If you're ever going on a trip,
I bet
he's the guy to tell you, well, here's what I would do.
Actually, we hooked up your folks with our cruise consultant, Bonnie, and she is she loves your family.
My mom mentioned that. That's right. They were thrilled this was happening, by the way. My dad, my mom, they were like, that's so cool. I can't wait to watch it. So there's a whole team of Jessica. Everybody's excited to see this once it's all done.
I love it.
To what you said, and really, Willie, what you said as well, the manifestation of an idea is so much exponentially faster if others participate with it. If you are exposing yourself to people who don't think like you, if you're seeing cultures that are different, or if you are, in the case of what I've experienced, if you are collaborating with other individuals who have done, maybe they've done X, Y, and Z for the last 8 years, something you have no experience with. You tell them kind of what it is your idea is, and they say, oh, that's really cool. You know, what'd be really even better is if I took what I do and I wrapped it in that, or if I gave it my own flair. Now my idea has layers. Now it's not just mine.
Yeah.
And I think it also, Joe, you also highlighted the fact that, once you get 30 other people's ideas mixed with yours in a business model that you've revised 3 or 4 times, now you get to present it as your idea. What I love about the way that you're saying it is that you always include those other people. And that's something that I've really, whenever there's somebody comes in here or sees all this or asks like, how in the world did all this happen? I always present it from the standpoint of, yeah, it's really fun. I've worked on it, and I'm just really fortunate. I get to work with dozens of different people who have all contributed to this. Sure. This is, I get to be the face, but at the same time, I always make sure that I tell people, yeah, I'm not the savant, single, unilateral, independent individual to come up with this. This was a collaboration of ideas. Tons of different people.
Well, Brandon, one of the topics that is always on my mind is like, who gets the credit? Because that causes so much trouble in the world and in businesses. Like, who gets the credit? And like, I personally get way too much credit because like my name it says Joe's Farm Girl, this and that, or
right.
And it's been in the press, and I'm like the head cheerleader. Everybody's like the head cheerleader. They did everything. Like there was at Peixoto today, I saw you over there, and like the lady comes up to me. I just want to tell you thank you for all you've done for Gilbert. And then another says, I just want to tell you how much you've done for Gilbert, for my family. It's like, and I want to explain, hey, you know what? We have this huge team. I've been a little part of it. I have done some things. Okay, granted, I've done some things, but it was like all the other people in the ball of yarn. Then the team, like Willy's got a massive team of incredible people in social media and PR and leasing and all that stuff. And they need to be brought out. But you know how it is. Like if someone asks you that, it's like, that's not really what they want to, they just want to thank, they just want it's an actual like,
best to just say thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate that. It took a lot. I try to say it took a lot of people. It's just, but they want to thank you personally. And it's just like, we don't want to be glorified over God. And there's this whole thing about, I don't know, that whoever gets the credit, like Willy should get the credit for Epicenter. I should get some credit for Epicenter. The teams should get some credit for Epicenter, and the more we're able to like say, I don't have to get the credit, then you can do a lot of stuff. If you don't have to get the credit, man, you can get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah.
I
totally agree.
That's one of the things, for me, I've got some key team members who've been a part of my team for over 10 years. And, I'm always like, I want to make sure that they're included in press releases and things, make sure that, they know as we're letting the dust settle on our end, they still have a pipeline of things that they're trying to accomplish is, hey, how can I pitch them for this? How can I get them involved in these things? And so for me, that's always one of my biggest things is I tell every journalist that calls me for an interview to talk episode. I'm like anything else. I'm like, I have to tell you, this is not a one-man show. I was like, there's a team of people that have made this happen. I'm just one of the few. I mean, one of the many. And I think that's one of the important things to do is get that across. And it is hard when people are like, Willy, Epicenter's great. Yeah, it is great. Like it's super great. But, over 1,000 hands have touched that project.
Right.
And so when you talk to the construction workers that built it, the team of superintendents behind the scenes, everybody who is a tenant below on the bottom floor, all the residents, like there are thousands of people who have touched this project. And yet,
you're the one they want to call on it.
Yeah. And so it's hard because sometimes I'm like, I am a little bit more introverted. I love being in the office, working hard. And when people say thank you, I'm like, cool. But it's that beautiful thing that it does take a team, and collaboration and just who we have has been fantastic. And it is one of the things that's hard. I mean, my dad gets a ton of credit, and he deserves a lot of it too, because he has put in years of patience.
Yeah.
Obviously a financial interest in the project for sure too. And he's also entrusted me and the team that I have to handle it. And so there are things to go around for everybody, but it is that hard thing when people want to, there's certain social media business guys out there where it's like, it's all me. And it's like,
I know.
That's never possible. It's just not possible.
And they're taking advantage. They're doing exactly the opposite of what it is they should be doing, because it's a responsibility.
Yeah.
But you have a responsibility if you are the head cheerleader, if you are the team manager, to. It's also why I love podcasting, because this gives the opportunity for you to explain that in a longer tangent. You can take 5 minutes explaining what your team members did and how everybody contributed. But like you said, if it's a person that stops you at Peixoto, if you're going to post on social media, these guys, they get 10 seconds. So they just, after an hour of deep meditation, I came up with it's the best idea.
You're talking about Chris Crown or whatever his name is?
Oh, him. Oh gosh, Trump. Anybody. It's the greatest idea anyone's ever had. And it seems like a lot of times ideas are not shared with the people who came up with them.
Yeah.
And I get back to, I think it is a responsibility for the people who are the visionaries, for the people who are the team leaders and the managers, to make sure, because you're going to go back to those people who you worked with prior, most likely, and try to do something else again.
Don't burn a bridge.
Do not burn a bridge. Remember those people, because they're going to remember you, and they're watching you a heck of a lot harder than you're watching them.
Yeah.
You're probably not checking on what your team members are doing, but you better believe they're watching you. And if you go on an interview and you don't, you do I came up with this idea, it was the best moment of anyone's life.
I built the whole building myself.
Yeah, did it myself with no help from anyone. And it's just not a good look.
No.
And I think there's a lesson to be learned in that for everybody, no matter where you're at. If you're new to business, you're going to make a lot of stupid decisions, and a lot of those decisions are based on ego. I have found that myself, the second half of my professional career is certainly a lot better and healthier than the first half, where if anything went right, I would take all the credit. And if anything went wrong, I didn't have anything to do with it. Yeah, pass the blame.
Well, that, one of the things that my dad and mom did that was, at the time I was very frustrated. You knew me at the time. I was a dishwasher at the farm grill.
Yeah, I remember.
So they had me as a dishwasher for a year. Even though my skill set was far beyond, in my mind, dishwashing, I learned the importance of every position. And, oftentimes in life and in the world, we glorify the owners, we glorify the entrepreneurs, but the people that actually build a building, or that wash the dishes, or that cook the meat, or that, the attorneys that are behind the scenes helping with leasing, they're the ones that actually make it all function and flow. And so for me, what I learned at a young age is, hey, if dishes aren't washed, nobody's fed. And I think those are some of those things that, were kind of early in my life implemented. And I don't know if that was a conscious decision to make me be a dishwasher for a long time or not, but my kids are about to be dishwashers.
It all worked out.
My daughter and my son and my youngest son, it's like, you're going to start as a dishwasher somewhere, like you have to experience it to see just how hard it is being in dish pit.
Yeah.
No windows and just washing dishes, but it's valuable. It's valuable.
Did you see what you did?
Well, my dad did it to me. He's you don't start on the tractor. You start out there with a hoe hoeing the weeds.
Yeah.
It just is what it is.
That is a wonderful generational lesson to pass down. It
is.
And it breeds, I think, a much more competent professional as you grow. And I'm sure you'd agree.
Oh, yeah.
You can look back on those really tough times and be like, well, I didn't have to start as a dishwasher. That was done to me for a reason. And I can look back on that and say now, you know what? That actually served me a lot now that I'm older. In the case of something like this, like I said, I had a couple of ventures fail. This was something that I'm like, well, I can't afford to pay anybody to clean this place. I'll clean it. I'll do the toilets. I'll clean it. I'm going to do this whole thing with no one. And that's how it started. Totally. And that's, I think it's a lot, you appreciate it a lot more. You appreciate the success if you truly do have your fingers in the dirt at the beginning of any venture.
And then you typically are one of the more skilled people to do anything. And for me, that's what I've seen is like, I was able to go through the ranks in every restaurant that we've had for the most part. And when it came time to do real estate, I knew that, hey, I can take what I've learned both education, but also in practicality in business and apply it, and had the business acumen earlier than most because, I was put through the ringer. Yeah. And in the end, like I learned so much from those days that I look back and it's like, wow, that was at the moment, did I appreciate it? No, I was like, this sucks. Like, why in the world am I doing this?
Yep.
But now, there are so many times where I've looked and said, you know what? If these things hadn't happened, I wouldn't have these skills or these traits that have made me, the man and husband and businessman, son that I am today. So.
Absolutely. Willie, Joe, thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you,
That was a
Brandon.
wonderful
Brandon.
episode.
Thank you.
Lots
I
of fun.
appreciate it.
Brandon.
Good job, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
All right,
Yes.
we'll cut it there. Thank you guys so much for watching that episode of Becoming the 1% podcast. If you like the content and you want to see more of it, hit the like and subscribe. Activate that notification bell as well. We really appreciate it. If you guys want to see more of it, we actually have the Becoming the 1% Instagram, and the podcast is available on Spotify. For our socials, we have Strict Vision Athletics on Instagram, we have it on YouTube, and we have it on TikTok.